Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah. So the last part of this chapter that we discussed yesterday was the acts that we are recommended to have wudu for. He concluded this part with talking about touching the mushaf. The scholar here who authored this book, I think he feels that it is recommended to have wudu to touch the mushaf, while the vast majority and almost a consensus of scholars of Muslims is that it's obligatory to have wudu. It's mandatory to have wudu to touch and hold the mushaf. So his opinion here is really a weak opinion, and we have the ayah in لا يمسه إلا المطهرون. نعم في كتاب إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين. Because people who said this ayah is not talking about the mushaf, they said it's referring to the preserved tablets, and the mutahharun here are the angels. They are the only ones who touch those preserved tablets. But if you look at the context of the ayah, it's actually talking about the Quran. إنه لقرآن كريم في كتاب exactly لقرآن كريم في كتاب مكنون لا يمسه إلا المطهرون تنزيل من رب العالمين. So the beginning and the end is talking about the Quran. So the middle two verses are also talking about the Quran. And Ibn Taymiyyah said that okay, we will agree that this is talking about the preserved tablets. Just like he used analogy, he says just like the preserved tablets are not to be touched except by the pure angels because it contains the Quran al-Karim. Similarly, the tablets that we have on this earth are not to be touched by except those purified human beings as well. It's a very strong analogy. He even went further and said that just like also the Quran is not to be touched physically except by somebody who is pure, also the Quran will not enter the heart. The meaning of the Quran and the light of the Quran will not enter the heart unless it is also purified from sin and from shirk and from bid'ah and all these other things that violate the commandments of Allah Azza wa Jal. And this is what we all see, that when we sin, our attachment to the Quran and our sense and feeling of the beauty of the Quran and the increase in iman that a person experiences when he reads the Quran goes down when the heart is not purified. So definitely. And then this hadith, لا يمس القرآن إلا طاهر. Yes, this hadith has some weakness. There's multiple chains of narration of this hadith, and it's also mentioned in the book that Prophet ﷺ sent a man called Amr ibn Hazm to Yemen with this. This book had multiple instructions from the Prophet ﷺ, and it had this hadith as well in it. لا يمس القرآن إلا طاهر. Only those who are purified are allowed to touch the Quran. So although this hadith has some weakness in its chain of narration, still it has multiple chains and each one of them has some weakness to it, but in none of the chains is there a liar. And that is why scholars like Imam Al-Albani says, if you look at all these chains of narration collectively, they all indicate that this is definitely a saying of the Prophet ﷺ. And they all say that this book that was sent by Prophet ﷺ at the hands of Amr ibn Hazm to Ahl al-Yemen has become so famous and so well known throughout the Muslim world that it doesn't need actually a chain of narration. Just like I mentioned to you before, certain things are so obvious in our deen that to start looking for chains of narration for, you actually making your case a little bit weaker, because something is so obvious and so well known and so widespread and so widely practiced. It's almost a consensus of the Muslim scholars. How did all these Muslim scholars agree on that matter if it didn't have some evidence behind it coming from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? In the last class I said Amr ibn Shu'aib an abihi an jaddi. This was wrong. It is actually Amr ibn Hazm, not Amr ibn Shu'aib. Okay, this hadith is narrated by Amr ibn Hazm in the book sent by Amr on the hands of Amr ibn Hazm. So the next part here, the scholar, the author of this book, talks about nawaqid al-wudu. What would break the wudu? And Not sure if we can go through them, but okay. We can start. What time? Anybody keeping the time or no?
5 minutes.
With only 5 minutes left?
No, we've just used 5 minutes.
Okay. نواقض الوضوء ما خرج من السبيلين. Whatever comes out السبيلين, basically the private parts, whether the urethra or basically the rectum, whatever comes out, that it could be in the form of urine, like from the front, could be in the form of urine, could be in the form of madhi, which is the pre-seminal fluid. It could be in the form of mani, which is the semen. Of course, semen will not only break the wudu, but will require a full ghusl. It will be the major defilement that comes with the ejaculation of semen. And also defecation, of course, from behind, passing gas, all these things break the wudu. And this is mentioned clear in ayah, أو جاء أحد منكم من الغائط. Allah specifically mentioned that using the washroom is something that breaks the wudu. لا يقبل الله صلاة أحدكم إذا أحدث حتى يتوضأ لا وضوء إلا من حدث. There's multiple ahadith that tell us these facts, and this is well known from Islam. We almost don't have to talk about it too much. Also the madhi, the pre-seminal fluid, اغسل ذكرك وتوضأ. You wash the private parts and you make wudu if that pre-seminal fluid came out, and so on. لا ينفتل أو لا ينصرف حتى يسمع صوتا أو يجد ريحا. Passing gas, this is mentioned in this hadith, that if you feel something, you don't in your salah, then you don't leave your salah unless you're sure that you have actually passed gas. If this has happened and you're sure about it, then you basically have broken your wudu and you have to leave the salah and repeat your wudu. The other thing is zawalul aql. If somebody loses consciousness, such as fainting, this is something we don't talk about that often, but if somebody underwent an anesthetic or fainted, hit his head and lost consciousness, that is also something that breaks the wudu. And that is because even sleep would break the wudu, because you lose control, you don't know what happened during that time. And for a stronger reason than zawal al-aql, for somebody to lose consciousness or faint or be anesthetized, drugged up, so he doesn't know what's happening, all this breaks the wudu. Mass al-farj bi-shahwa, to touch the private parts but with shahwa, with some kind of arousal. Mere touching alone doesn't break the wudu, but touch with arousal, then that does break the wudu. إذا مس أحدكم ذكره فليتوضأ إذا أفضى أحدكم بيده إلى فرجه وليس بينهما ستر ولا حجاب فليتوضأ. There's multiple hadith on this matter, but there's also hadith in which a man mentioned to Prophet ﷺ that he touched his private parts. He said to him, إنما هو بضعة منك. He says, this is only a part of you. So to reconcile between the ahadith, the more than one hadith that indicate that if you touch the private part, then you have to make wudu, and this hadith in which he instructed the man and told him that it's only a part of your body, which means you don't have to make wudu, the scholar said that the difference is that the ahadith that indicate that you have to make wudu are referring to touching with some kind of excitation or arousal, okay? And that is because he said to him, إنما هو بضعة منك. It's like any other part of your body. So if somebody touched the private part, just like he touches any other part of his body, like his leg or his hand, without any kind of feeling, then that is okay. But if he touched it with a different kind of feeling, then that breaks the wudu. أكل لحم الإبل, eating the meat of camel. Prophet ﷺ was asked, نتوضأ من لحوم الإبل أتوضأ من لحوم الإبل قال نعم فتوضأ من لحوم الإبل. Before that he was asked, should we make wudu from eating goat's meat? He said no. And when he was asked about camel meat, he said yes. And there's more than one hadith. عن جابر بن سمرة كنا نتوضأ من لحوم الإبل ولا نتوضأ من لحوم اللحم. So that is well known from multiple ahadith. Sleep as well is something that breaks the wudu, and what the kind of sleep that breaks the wudu is the deeper sleep where you don't know or you don't feel what could have happened while you were not really totally awake.
So if you're watching telly and you sleep, why sitting down watching telly?
Yeah.
Does that break the wudu?
If it's not the matter of position. It doesn't matter sitting up or laying down, because some scholars said that if you fell asleep while sitting up, that does not break the wudu, while if you laid down, that would break. No, there's no hadith to make that kind of distinction, but the distinction is based on the depth of sleep. Sometimes you just doze off a little bit like this, but you are aware if something happened, then you would know. If somebody passed gas, he would know. But sometimes if you're so tired that you fall asleep like this, even you doze off, but you fall asleep so deeply that you wouldn't even know what happened, then that definitely. So to be on the safe side, if you're not really sure, better make the wudu.
So is there any reason mentioned about not the need of covering related
No, there's no hadith that tells us why it is prohibited. Why eating the camel meat breaks the wudu. This is al-illa ta'abbudiyya. When we don't know the reason behind it, we say the illah is like just a commandment from Allah Azza wa Jal. It's a form of ibadah to obey Allah in what you do not know the reason behind. And many things in Sharia, Allah decided, وَرَبُّكَ يَخْلُقُ مَا يَشَاءُ وَيَخْتَارُ مَا كَانَ لَهُمُ الْخِيَارَةُ لَا يُسْأَلُ عَمَّا يَفْعَلُ وَهُمْ يُسْأَلُونَ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses whatever He wills and decides whatever He wills. Sometimes He commands us with certain commandments that we don't know the wisdom behind, as a mere test for our obedience and discipline. And a good example would be the number of rak'at in salah. They could have been less, they could have been more, right? But Allah Azza wa Jal decided these number of rak'ats specifically, chose the months of Ramadan specifically, chose this timing for fasting specifically. He could have done that fasting otherwise, right? So many things in Sharia. The tawaf is 7. Why 7? Why do you go from this place to this place? Why not change the order? Why not change the number? If somebody changed the number, it's not accepted, right? And this is many acts, many parts in Sharia are a mere test for obedience and discipline. Now, the hadith is for sleep. العينان وكاء السهي العينان فمن نام فليتوضأ. Basically means the staying awake or being alert is the safeguard for knowing whether or not you have passed gas. فمن نام فليتوضأ. Whoever falls asleep, he should make wudu. Now, so if somebody just felt sleepy but didn't totally fall asleep, then it's okay. Now, certain things do not break wudu, such as, and because some people may think they break the wudu, such as vomiting. Vomiting does not break the wudu. If you are not sure if you have passed gas, then you don't have to break the wudu, because there's a hadith on this matter. إذا وجد أحدكم في بطنه شيئا فأشكل عليه أخرج منه شيء أم لا فلا يخرجن من المسجد حتى يسمع صوتا أو يجد ريحا. If you feel some cramping in your stomach or you hear some noises from your intestines, this is the meaning of the hadith, and you are not sure has something come out or not, meaning passing gas, then he says you do not have to leave the masjid unless you have heard the sound or perceived a smell, which means until you are sure. So to doubt whether or not you have passed gas, then that does not break the wudu. Also, if somebody did masah al-khuffayn, for instance, and then took them off, that does not break his wudu. So if somebody has made wudu or made masah al-khuffayn after that and took them off, that mere act does not break the wudu unless he breaks the wudu after that. Because at the time when he made that kind of masah, that wudu with the wiping on the shoe or the sock, he did what he needed to do to be in a state of tahara. So you don't remove him from that state of tahara or purified state, except for something that you are sure that it does break the wudu. Also, touching the private part without desire, without arousal or excitation does not break the wudu. Also, touching, for instance, the wife does not break the wudu. Sorry? It would not be, even a kiss would not break the wudu as long as no pre-seminal fluid has come out. As long as nothing has come out. If something has come out, then it does. Then the wudu has been broken for that reason. Okay.
What about during Ramadan?
It doesn't matter. Ramadan or outside of Ramadan, it's the same, and it doesn't affect the siyam either. Also, for blood to come out, that does not break the wudu. We mentioned that before. The Muslims were frequently injured in battles, and they continued to pray, not having to make the wudu. We mentioned about the fact that the blood itself is not najis based on these as well, although the majority of scholars consider it as najis. طاووس ومحمد بن علي وعطاء وأهل الحجاز قالوا ليس في الدم وضوء. Then you don't have to make wudu from just some blood coming out.
Incontinence, if somebody suffers from incontinence.
Sorry?
Incontinence, usually people with incontinence.
That's a good one. If somebody is incontinent, he cannot control urine coming out, or even if somebody has a colostomy, that is that bag where the feces is coming out from the intestines continuously, or somebody cannot control passing gas, then that person makes the wudu for every salah. He makes the wudu for every salah, and it doesn't matter after he has made wudu. He only makes the wudu after the time of the salah has come, and he makes the salah right away. He doesn't leave an interval. But let's say he made the wudu and there's continuous urine coming out, or the feces or the gas, his wudu is still valid for that salah. That's an excuse, that's an exception. He's allowed this exception. And also, if a woman has continuous blood coming out, istihada, that would have normally broken the wudu. But if she has continuous throughout the days and nights, then she makes the wudu for every salah and she prays. And even if something comes out during the salah or just before they did the salah, it is totally okay. Prophet ﷺ says, وَلَوْ قَطَرَ الدَّمُ عَلَى الْحَصِيرِ قَطْرًا. He says, he told the woman, even if the blood falls on your prayer mat, don't worry about it. We'll stop here, inshallah.